a lot of doctors, and I mentioned this in the introduction, talk about the restorative power of sleep. And, anecdotally, all of us know that a good night's sleep and the next day you're so feeling so much better, happier, more cheerful, less stressed, and so on and so forth. Um, Wherever I read about the power of sleep, the power of exercise, and the power of good food habits as the three top things that help our mental and physical well-being. So, as a sleep specialist, can you share with all of us what exactly sleep does?
Yeah. So for me, sleep is the foundation, right? Where all these other pillars you just mentioned sort of stand on. Nutritionists probably would say, nutrition is the foundation. But for me, sleep's the foundation because, I can have the best diet in the world or exercise. But if I don't sleep well, all of these good things, they fall sort of through the cracks, right? So I need my sleep. And as I said a moment ago, it's important for our physical health. And then in particular, for example, right now, the immune system, right? So good sleep strengthens our immune system, and also the immune system impacts on our sleep. Sleep's also important for the efficacy of vaccinations. Again, really relevant right now. While there have been no studies on the coronavirus vaccinations, we know from other vaccines, it's important to sleep well the nights before your vaccination appointment and the nights after. That helps to develop the antibody titer that you are, aiming for, hoping for. So I think that's really relevant. It's also sort of for our brain, or for the sort of cleaning or washing of the brain. That's a few years this came out, that when we sleep, our brain clears itself of all the toxins that naturally accumulate in the day while we're using our brain, and using up energy resources and breaking down proteins. What happens when we sleep is they can be sort of flushed away. And we really need to sleep. Just lying there in the dark with your eyes closed isn't going to do it. Because there's slight changes in cells in the brain, in the size of them, that then allows fluid to wash through. And, and then there are many other reasons for physical health, I don't want to go into because it will take a long time. And another part is our cognitive abilities, right? Sort of the thinking, our ability to grasp the situation, to understand what's going on, to make accurate decisions, to weigh up the risk, but also our moral awareness. Sort of our ethical behavior is influenced by sleep, or particular lack of sleep. It's not like we suddenly lose all our morals. The principles stay, but our awareness when someone else is trespassing or when we sort of ethically misbehave, that's reduced. Makes sense, because generally our attention and situational awareness is reduced. And then there's creative thinking, which I think right now, given the situation we find ourselves in, we need to think outside the box. How can we tackle this whole pandemic? And, going forward, how can we prevent or minimize the occurrence of another pandemic? So that's hugely important, our sleep there, to think creatively. And the third one here is the emotional well-being, the mood, which we already touched on. And for me, actually, I'd say that's the most important part of sleep, what sleep restores. My ability to be able to communicate appropriately with other people so that we can have this conversation, for example, right? Empathy skills are dependent on good sleep. And again, with that comes understanding what other people are going through. And that's important in a sort of family setting, but also in a workplace setting. If you're working with clients trying to fix their problems, you need to understand what they're going through. You need empathy skills, right? And good communication skills. So I think that for me, the sort of emotional well-being is actually from where sleep matters the most. For us.
But Dr. Kat, this is absolutely fascinating because, the more I'm thinking about what should leaders be thinking of, what managers should be thinking of, and clearly, I think it's very much demonstrated during this pandemic that a good leader is one who has empathy. A good leader is one who's able to communicate what is happening and make sense of everything that's happening around us, right? And a good leader is one who has a strong ethical and moral backbone, right? And you're saying all these three get cleansed or develop better if we sleep better. I hear you say that it's really when you're sleeping, the noise gets cleared up and you're able to focus on what's right versus what's wrong. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way. Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So sleep helps to process our emotional experiences from the day, right? So that we get into a more neutral position and don't sort of overreact the next day, for example. And generally, and I guess this is a bit like when you're hungry, or certainly I know this. If I'm hungry and have to make decisions, if I haven't eaten, or they're typically not good, and I become very erratic and a bit ratty in my mood as well. But once I've restored my nutritional and energy resources, I'm much calmer, right? Much more relaxed, able to kind of look at all the information in front of me and make a decision where to go next. Taking that same sort of example, applying it to sleep or lack of sleep, it's exactly what you said. You can't really look at the situation. And so sleep helps to sort of cleanse, that noise away. I think I really like that analogy. Yeah.
So, in this world where many of us are so worried about the polarization that is happening, the nationalism and this whole noise about me and mine and boundaries getting hardwired, opinions getting stronger, is a good night's sleep the cure, you think?
So I think yes. There is a famous saying, a quote from Thomas Dekker from 1664, and he said something along those lines: "Sleep is the golden chain that ties our health and body together." And for me, I've sort of taken that and adapted it, and sort of sleep is the social glue that ties society together. Because when we're sleep deprived, again, coming back to the emotional state, we become our inbuilt bias for negativity becomes more pronounced, and we feel attacked very quickly. We look at everything from this angle as, oh, is she out there going to get me? I have to protect myself, right? And then we will react aggressively. Even if someone makes a compliment, we'll kind of misinterpret that in a way. So you're right, sort of this whole sense of me, this is mine, I need to protect myself and draw fences around me. I'm not saying lack of sleep is to blame, but we know that many people aren't experience good quality sleep. Thinking of leaders who have a lot of responsibility, a lot of stuff to think about and pay attention to, I'm sometimes wondering, well, when do you have time to sleep for 8 hours, however exactly much you need? And how good is that quality, and how is that impacting on your decision-making the next day? So I think these are important questions to ask.
Yeah. In fact, you've given me a great tip. So if two of my team members are confrontational and not willing to see the other's point of view, I'm just going to tell them, go home, have a good night's sleep, and come back. You'll think better tomorrow. You'll see the other person's point of view.
Yeah, and your emotional well-being will be balanced, right?
Very well said. Very well said indeed. So circling back to women, which is a topic of interest for both of us. As I told you, the first time I suffered from a lack of sleep and I moved from a deep sleeper to this ultra light sleeper was the time when my son was born. The second time, sleep really deserted me, and I've still not got it back. I look for it everywhere as a long lost companion. I'm still not able to find it. Is around my perimenopause and menopausal phase. Now, menopause, unfortunately, something that nobody talks about, right? If I go crying to my mom and say, I think I'm suffering from perimenopausal symptoms, etc., she'll just say, shut up. We all dealt with it. So can you. It's only now, especially in a country like India, where increasing number of working women are at that stage that they are going through these symptoms, I see at least the conversation around menopause go up. Now, one of the issues around menopause is also this sleeplessness. For example, as far as I'm concerned, I just am unable to sleep. It's almost as if the tube light is just not switching off, how much ever I try. And again, I know a lot of women, I believe research says that nearly 50 to 60% women suffer from sleeplessness during this phase. So what's happening apart from those hormonal changes? What is happening at this menopausal state that is impacting sleeplessness. And I also understand that it's so much to do with the life stage we are in. So suddenly you are an empty nester. Suddenly, from being the center of this family where your children were saying mom, mom constantly to your husband, who's now stopped talking to you and is playing golf all the time, you just left alone. So what's happening to women, and again, what is the correlation with sleeplessness?
Yeah, so a lot is happening, and you mentioned already a lot of factors. So sleep or poor sleep is one, if not the core symptom of the menopause. So many women who report it, right, up to 60%, but I think numbers can vary a little bit. But one big reason is the changes in hormones, those fluctuations. And we know that ovarian hormones, or estrogen and progesterone, FSH, they're all somehow impacting on sleep, and sleep impacts on them, right? So there's a bidirectional relationship. And so when these fluctuations then start to happen, this is likely to directly impact sleep. But there's also other factors, and you mentioned sort of empty nest, right? That's a change. So a change in lifestyle, but also career changes, sort of going up the ladder, or maybe reaching a peak, or lack of support. That's a really big one. A woman not feeling supported at work, but sort of broadly in her social life as well, can negatively impact on sleep. And then there's also the impact of aging, just normal aging, and men experience that in their way as well, the changes that happen there. And also related to that, again, our health, the overall health, that can play a role. So there's a lot that comes together when we go through the menopause. But for me, one question that I'm often asking my clients is, how do you talk to yourself? So when you, for example, have a hot flash, so 80% of women going through the menopausal transition talk about hot flashes or night sweats, and they are also related to poor sleep. It's not sort of crystal clear. Does a hot flash cause, the wake up, or do we wake up before, or is it maybe something else, a third factor that we don't know yet? So not entirely sure, but we know there is an association between the hot flash and waking up or poor quality sleep. But I ask my clients, how do you talk to yourself? How do you relate to yourself when you can't sleep, in that moment when you are awake, but also during the day? And what I often hear back is sort of an inner critic shows up, comes up and is like, oh, you should be sleeping. Why does this happen? Why weren't you more careful? Why did you eat that spicy food? You should have gone for a 5K run yesterday, but you didn't. That's why you're now waking up. And so this inner bully comes out. And when we are being bullied, by, another person, we don't feel great. We feel small. We feel tense. We feel afraid. The same emotions and sort of physical sensations can happen when our own inner critic starts to bully us, for not sleeping well enough, for then not looking good enough, maybe putting on some weight, having sweaty armpits because of, the sweats, and so on and so forth. So that for me is maybe not the trigger, but it is sort of something that inner critic who can perpetuate or make things worse. And so that's something I always explore with my clients.
So it's so fascinating when you talk about this inner critic, because this is what so many women have told me about their lives in general, not just with respect to sleep, that constantly they are feeling under pressure. One is the pressure that the world puts on them, the expectations of everybody on what you should do and what you can do, what you cannot do as a girl, as a woman. Equally, that little imposter sitting inside so many women, always telling them, you're not good enough, you can't do this. And now this imposter obviously doesn't seem to sleep, because even in the night, it's staying awake and saying you should have slept better. Why are you getting these hot flushes? So tell us, tell me, tell all the women who are listening to us today, what can we do? What can we do to manage both our sleep and our life better? How do you deal with this criticism, whether external or internal, the pressures that women put on themselves, again, whether external or internal, the multitasking which they feel they ought to do, have to do, the perfection. I have to be the best mother and the best potter and the best executive and the best marathon runner. How should we deal with it? And what are the tips you would give specifically in your area of expertise to sleep better?
So I think there are different sort of levels or angles of how to come at it. One is around from society. It needs to be really fully known or accepted that there is difference between, men and women, how they sleep, and the different factors. Comes in then, to acknowledge menopause as a stage in a woman's life that's natural, that's normal, that is going to have an impact in certain ways, right? So that's one thing. And also related to that, I think that women aren't the primary caregiver, that this sort of household work, those obligations, to divide them up better, or at least, starting a conversation there so that a woman doesn't feel like she has to juggle it all. So I think that's something. And then there are, of course, healthy sleep habits, having regular sleep times and light exposure and what you eat and exercise, and, all of that is super important. I think the third one, though, is really the most powerful one, and that's how do I relate to myself, right? How do I sort of learn to be with that inner critic? Because many of us who are aware, not everyone is aware of their inner critic, so I think that's the first thing, notice. But then those who have, there's often this sort of aim, I want to get rid of her, push her off, and you can maybe push her, but very quickly she comes back. And so shifting here and actually befriending that inner critic. I'm not talking about, making it your best friend or, I'm so happy to see you, thank you very much. But being a bit kinder almost to yourself by being kinder to that inner critic, acknowledging, yeah, I hear you. And maybe there's a bit of work to be done. Why does this inner critic show up? And for many of us, it comes from, way back when we were children. And often the inner critic served as some sort of protective mechanism back then, not anymore, right? And so that's why I like this idea of befriending your inner critic, saying, yeah, thanks very much for showing up. You served a function once when I was little, protecting me, kind of helping me, learn certain things and so on and so forth. But now I'm this wise woman. I've got this situation, thanks very much. And related to that, practicing self-compassion, really compassion for myself, for what I'm going through right now. And the menopause, again, every woman goes through it to different degrees. It will look different in different women, but a lot of it is we share, right? And so this idea of common humanity, there are other women going through this. It's very normal. It's normal that I have this, some call it menofog or brain fog, where cognitively you're just not so fully there maybe, or, feeling tired or unable to concentrate or forgetting things. While this is deeply unpleasant, it's very normal. Right? I'm not doing anything wrong. It's biology playing its course. And by taking on this kinder voice and kinder approach to my own experience, that bullying doesn't happen anymore. Right. And so there isn't that feeling of, I'm so small, I'm worthless. It's like, yeah, this is what we're all going through as a woman. Yeah. It opens up, literally opens up, the body position will be differently. And with that comes a level of relaxation and calmness. And what I find really encouraging is that there's some research data to actually show that women who go through the menopause, who experience hot flushes, if they practice self-compassion, they are less bothered by these hot flushes and therefore have a better quality of life. I find that really encouraging. It's what I see in my practice, in my work with women as well. So that's what I would say as sort of my top one tip is befriend your inner critic and develop self-compassion, a caring or kind understanding of what you're going through.